Dia de los Muertos started out as an indigenous practice in Mexico and in, further south. It's a worship of ancestors. While the indigenous community practiced this, for hundreds of years, recently the Chicano community here in the United States decided that that was a ritual and practice they wanted here for the Chicano community here in Los Angeles. Dia de los Muertos was brought to us from Mexico by an artist by the name of Carlos Bueno. He was one of the founders of self-help graphics in Boyle Heights. Our community embraced it, and it eventually grew larger and larger. It spread throughout Los Angeles, and now Dia de los Muertos is spreading nationwide in very many cities throughout the country. But it started actually right here in Los Angeles. Our exhibition this year, 2017, is called Honoring Our Ancestors. And I feel that every culture needs to do that. You need to think about where you came from. So in our exhibits, we make sure that we have very many voices speaking. We look for art that is varied, and we want it varied. We would not want a gallery full of altars that look similar. For example, we have an altar by Nica Aquino. Her family comes from the Philippines. She has a lot of family still in the Philippines. Her altar is dedicated to her brother, who was assassinated by President Duterte's vigilantes. And her altar is not only to her brother, but it also speaks to the practice of extrajudicial murders, killings. And so she's speaking to two things: honoring her brother while also making a political point. It's a very beautiful altar and very moving altar. We have a piece of art by the artist Kathy Metz. And Kathy's painting is a very ethereal piece. It has no up or down. It has no narrative. It's a painting of clouds. And so her feeling is that when she thinks about the ancestors who came before, they're spirit figures. They have no flesh. They're in our hearts and in our minds. And so her painting to her ancestors, the people who came before her, are paintings of beautiful clouds. It's a very poetic piece, very beautiful piece. Another artist in the show is Rosa Limon. Rosa Limon is a fabric artist. Her grandmother was a seamstress and her grandfather was a tailor. She was inspired to be a fabric artist from her grandparents. When she was growing up, her grandmother always told her that she never had a wedding gown. She just got married, and she loves wedding gowns. And so when her grandmother died, she decided she was going to make her grandmother a wedding gown / resting gown. So she made it for her grandmother. They put this wedding gown on her grandmother, and they rested her into the coffin. So it's a very beautiful symbolism that she wanted to give something to her grandmother that her grandmother never had in her lifetime, but she would have it forever in eternity. And so what we see is a piece of the fabric from that wedding gown, and beautiful flowers and candles, and a picture of her grandmother. One of the more interesting pieces in the show is a work by, it's an assemblage by artist Victoria Arreola. Victoria chose not to do an altar for her ancestors, but chose to do an altar that speaks to the loss of home. So her piece is an assemblage that she did of a bird cage with metal wrapped around it, making it look like bars in a window for protection. And she calls it the loss of our homes. So it's an altar to those people who have lost their homes through gentrification and displacement. And I had spoken to artists in the very beginning that when they decide what their piece is going to be, it doesn't have to be to your ancestors. It could be the loss of something in your life. It could be political. It could be a hero that you worshipped, a pet, an animal, but something that has moved you that you've lost. And so for our community that is going through some very rapid gentrification and displacement, this was a very appropriate altar for us. And in fact, through discussion with the artist, Victoria Arreola, where we will be planning next year an exhibit around the questions of displacement and gentrification. So it moved me. Our crowning piece in the gallery is an altar, a community altar, put together by Suzette Vidal and Margaret Sosa. Suzanne wanted to do a tribute to those who have crossed borders and who have died crossing borders. So in Mexican folklore, the monarch butterfly represents flight from one place to another. So that represents the migration of those who have left Mexico and Central America seeking a better life up here in the US. Many have lost their lives. So you'll see a water bottle, a crushed water bottle on the altar, lots of candles, prayers that are hung on the trees for those who have lost their lives, and photographs. And other symbols that represent travel from one place to another. It's a very beautiful altar. The mission of the Avenue 50 Studio is to build bridges of understanding between and amongst cultures. We also believe that we need to hear the voice of our community, and we need to hear the voices of other communities, because in there we'll find similarities